turn her on. Today is August the 28th, 1997. We're at the 12th Armored Division reunion, the 51st one. My name is Charla Henson. I'm with Harlan S. Showers, and we're going to be talking about the 12th Armored Division. I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
Visiting with us. First of all, I need your name, where you were born, and what date that was.
Okay, my name is Harlan Showers. I was born down in Muskingum County by a little town called Cannaville on February the 13th, 1922. That makes me 75 years old.
Okay, tell me about your mom and dad and what they did.
Well, my dad was a coal miner, and he was down in Muskingum County, and he spent most of his, in fact, just about all of his life in the coal mining industry, and my mom was about the same way. They were married better than 50 years, and one had a large family. I think there's 9 of us in the family, and so we were from a large family, and not a well-to-do family, but we got along.
Okay, tell me your mom's name before she married, and then your dad's name.
My dad's name was Denzel Showers, and my mom's name was Mariah Hodgson, Hodgson.
Okay. Now then, there were 9 children?
Uh-huh.
Okay, start from the top and tell me where you're in there and go down and give me their names, please.
Okay. My oldest brother was Willard, and he's gone. Homer, he's gone. Joy, she's gone. Mary, she's gone. I'm next. Then I've got David is under me, and Jim, Harvey, and Molly.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
You did real well.
Okay, good.
Okay. Tell me about your early days, where you went to elementary school.
I started in elementary school in a one-room schoolhouse, and in a coal mining town, and it wasn't a well-to-do town. I mean, it was mainly coal miners, and but it wasn't and it was a one-room school. And during our coal mining experience, my dad moved. We moved several places, from coal mines to coal mines, and so my education was mainly in one room or small schools, and until I ended up where we live now, and that's we had a larger high school, which is no longer there, and my education goes to 12 grades. Yeah, and I finished up in Delaware County, that's just north of Columbus, Ohio, and that's where I graduated from, and that's where I still live, and that's where I met my wife in high school, and I had my wife before I went to the Army, and when we came back, she waited on me, and about a month after I got back from the Army in January of '96, we got married on Groundhog's Day.
Oh, wow. Well, tell me her name, your wife's name.
Her name is Roberta, which she never goes by Roberta. Bobby is her nickname, and everybody calls her, we even have Bobby on the checking account. And her maiden name was Clymer, Clymer.
Okay. What year did you graduate?
In 1941.
41. You got married in
46.
And how did you get from what you did between high school and the time you joined the Army?
I was inducted in the Army. I was inducted, and but I worked as on a painting crew, or more or less of an interior decorator. We did mostly inside work, and that was and even when I got out of the Army, to start out with, I went back to interior decorating or painting. Yeah, but I left that shortly.
Can I ask you why? Okay, you had dated Bobby since high school.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You were inducted to the, how come you didn't marry her before you left? And if that's too personal, I just think that'd be something good for people to know about.
I wasn't ready for it,
okay.
And I don't think she was either. And she's 3 years younger than I am. And I don't remember if she's still in school or not when I left for the Army or not. She might have been a senior in school, really. But I can't remember that. But right after I went to the Army, why, she had a, she before we went to the Army, she had a little health problem. And after I went to the Army, why, she went to the hospital and had an operation. And she still got the health, got the health problem, but she takes medication for it, but you would never know it. Yeah. Well, her health problem was myasthenia. And, but she had that while I was in the Army. And she had the operation while I was in the Army. But when I got back, why, and her health problem stopped us from having children.
Well, then but when you got back, you were ready to get married, huh?
I was ready.
You were ready?
Yeah, I was ready.
You had decided?
I decided, yeah. And she waited on me.
Okay,
yeah.
that's sweet.
And she's a nice person.
Neat. Okay, so you were inducted in Columbus or home? Or?
Well, just north of here, yes. I was inducted, and it was in Delaware County. That's the county north of Columbus, Ohio. And I was inducted there, and I went to Delaware, and they had a little parade when we all left, and then we went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania for basic.
How many of you young men left Delaware?
I think that there must have been. You mean when I left?
Yeah, when you had the parade and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there must have been 15 or 20 of us. Yeah. And in fact, one of the fellows that left with me is here today, which is real nice. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah, he's up on the registration desk. I mean,
who is that?
Clyde Googly. Okay. And he lives in Delaware, Ohio.
So then you went to basic. And how long were you at basic training?
I guess you wouldn't call it basic. Mm-hmm. From Indiantown Gap, I went right directly to Camp Campbell, and that was where 12th Armored Division was activated. And so I started with the 12th and finished with the 12th all the way through. So I really took my basic and training with the 12th Armored Division.
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so, because it was just being activated when I went in, and I started with the 12th, and I ended with the 12th.
Tell me about your first reaction, feeling, thoughts the first day you went to Camp Campbell.
Well, I guess it was... we was from a large family and never went. It felt unusual being away from home. Yeah. I mean, I guess that was the big thing was we from a large family and we never got out too much, and I was a long way from home, being to Camp Campbell. And but other than that, why, I guess I didn't have any problems.
So it was kind of what you expected?
I guess so. Yes. Okay. Yeah, and. Everybody, I had no problem with the Army because I always thought you should take orders, and they gave orders in the Army, and that didn't bother me any. Yeah, so I mean, really, it upset some people that when a fellow told you to do something, that made them upset, but that didn't bother me a bit because I was used to obeying orders.
Who was your captain over you, or would have been your captain that was over you when you first went in? Or did you kind of have a drill
I'm sorry,
sergeant?
but I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you remember about the training, the general, what you did, or things that stand out?
I guess I enjoyed it, and I did well in about everything I did, except for maybe an obstacle course. I wasn't very strong, but I mean, as far as my rifle out on the target range, I did well. 25-mile hike didn't bother me any. My feet was good. But I guess the only problem I had, and marching, some people didn't like to march, but I love the parade. I could parade every day in formation. I mean, that didn't bother me a bit. But I enjoyed basic training, except for the obstacle course, because I wasn't very strong.
Tell me about Tennessee maneuvers.
That was worse than combat.
Well, I want to know all about that.
It was interesting. I mean, I don't know how many times I crossed the Cumberland River in Tennessee maneuvers, and I crossed the Rhine River in the Army. And so, I mean, really it paid off. The training we took in Tennessee maneuvers crossing the Cumberland River, why, it paid off when we crossed the Rhine River on pontoon boats or bridges. And, I enjoyed Tennessee maneuvers, except it was rugged. I mean, sometimes I think they treat us harder on Tennessee maneuvers than they did on combat. But I mean, because they was trying to get you ready for combat, of course. And so, I mean, but other than that, it was in rugged terrain down in Tennessee. And we met some interesting people on. I remember one time we met some interesting people, and they took up to us, and it was out when we was out on maneuvers, and they brought us out fried chicken. and there's people there that I think they knew more just about where we was going to be on Friday. I seemed like on Friday sometime at noon why our maneuvers would stop, and then we'd get the weekend off. And there was always an ice cream truck there ready to sell you ice cream, and that was always a treat. Been on maneuvers all week long in the dirt and nothing to eat except for sea rations, and then hit an ice cream wagon and then eat ice cream, and we enjoyed that. And then we always got on weekends we got a pass to Nashville, and that was interesting. We didn't get to see too much, but we got to go to Nashville.
Was there so many soldiers at Campbell that it was so? Was Nashville full of soldiers on the weekend? Or?
Yes, yeah. Really, I mean, because it was close to Fort Knox and Camp Campbell and all that. So I mean, Nashville was an army town, just about. Yeah.
Well, were you? What was your job in the maneuvers?
I had the same job about all the way through. I guess when I went in, I had a car when I went in, and evidently I had a driver's license. And I didn't realize there was a lot of people who went in the Army that didn't drive. And that was one of the first things they did was give me an Army driver's license, and I could drive a half-track or a Jeep or things like that, or a truck. And so that was one of my first things was a driver. And I was always in the machine gun squad. And so on maneuvers, I was really a truck driver or a driver because I had a civilian Army license. And but I was always in the machine gun squad after. But a lot of times I was a driver, and I could drive half-track or a truck if they needed it, yeah. But I didn't end up that way, no. But and the reason I got it because I guess a lot of the young fellows that were inducted didn't have a car, and I just happened to have a car and had a driver's license. And then I think they saw that, and that's the first thing they did. They made me a truck driver. but I didn't end up a truck driver. No.
Well, y'all got through the maneuvers. Is there one story about the maneuvers that you tell everybody that you know? When you guys get together, there's one story that's always told about the maneuvers?
Oh, not unless it was the family that brought us chicken or crossing the Cumberland River. I mean, and that was, to me, we had to prepare for it, and it was hard work.
Did y'all build the bridge? I mean, did all of you learn?
We didn't. I mean, the engineers, but we had to protect the engineers while they're building the bridge.
Oh.
Yeah, and which is maneuvers, and a lot of times they did that at night under cover of darkness, and so we didn't get much sleep.
So they just kind of wore you out.
They just wore us out. Yeah.
About 3 months? Was it 2-3 months?
I expect it was about 3 months, and and as far as the facilities, we didn't have too many facilities. I mean, we was on our own as far as.
It's really like combat, huh?
Yeah, and if we had time, we slept in a pup tent, but it seemed like we didn't use the pup tent very often. It was on the go.
Yeah.
That's getting you ready for combat.
So, well then contrast Campbell and Barkley. What were the differences there between those two experiences in that way?
I guess the big the barracks in Camp Campbell were better. Well, of course, it's new. The Camp Campbell was a brand new camp when we went in, so we had new barracks. And the terrain was entirely different. We didn't have any sand in Kentucky like we had in Texas, and the weather was a little bit different. But other than that, why, we had two towns outside of Camp Campbell, Clarksville and Hopkinsville, and as long as I was in Camp Campbell, I was never in either one of those towns. I was the one that stayed close to camp. And I was telling somebody up to your booth upstairs about in Camp Barkley, I don't think I was ever in Abilene over a couple times. I just never got out of camp. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I stayed close to camp. And usually there was enough in camp to satisfy me. Movies and PXs and things like that. The only time I got out of camp in Camp Barkley was I had a sergeant, and he liked to run around quite a bit. And every time he'd get a pass, he wanted me to go with him, because I think he wanted me to go with him so I'd bring him home. and we always went to Brownsville or someplace up on the other side. And a couple times we even went as far as Fort Worth out of Camp Barkley. But he always wanted me to go with him. And but he nicest fellow, and he got killed the first day in action. But the nicest fellow. But he always wanted me to go with him when he went on a pass, and I went with him, and I enjoyed it. But I think he knew that I'd probably bring him home.
Yeah. Oh me. You were in the machine gun squad there. Which company? Which unit were you in?
Company C, 3rd Platoon.
Okay.
Company C, 3rd Platoon.
How many of you Camp Campbell men ended up in that platoon over at Barkley? Do you know?
As far as I know, everybody. Yeah, really. I mean, because we trained as a unit in Camp Campbell, and I think the whole unit went to Camp Barkley. Yeah, and we didn't have much change in personnel at all.
Okay, so y'all didn't bring in a lot of...
No, because we started as a training. Our basic training was as a unit, and so what we started with, we ended up with, and so the day that I started, a lot of the people that I started with, I ended up with. Yeah.
Out of all the guys in that unit, how many? What was the number? You had 12?
9 I think in the squad.
Yeah.
And let's see, there's 3 in a platoon. There's 3 rifle squads, a machine gun squad, and a mortar squad. And,
so in your squad.
Yeah. So I was in the machine gun squad, and and there's 9 that was in the machine gun squad.
How many of those guys who started together from Campbell ended up coming home?
I mean, they all weren't killed in action, but several of them were killed in action. But I wouldn't say there were 2 or 3 of us.
2 or 3.
Yeah, and I don't know for sure, but yeah. Yeah, but the first day in action, my sergeant, he got killed in action.
What was his name?
Stephen Piwok, or Piwok, P-I-W-O-K. Yeah, and he was from Detroit.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was Polish, and from Detroit, and the best fellow you'd ever want to meet. Yeah. A nice fellow, and he got, and he got killed the first day in action, and by our own artillery.
Oh, he was one of those first ones that got.
Got by our own artillery, yeah. And the last time I remember seeing him alive, I mean, we was taking this kind of a German barracks in this small town, and machine gun squad is actually, you set the machine gun down and shoot off the ground, and he picked up the machine gun on his hip and went through the barracks, and that's the last time I seen him alive. Yeah.
So y'all didn't deal with, okay, the Campbell men that stayed together, were those relationships different? And as you observed, the men from Campbell and then those replacements coming in at Barkley, how was the relationship there? Was it different between the replacements or the new people, ASTPs or whatever that?
There's a little different because, as I say, most of the people who went into Camp Campbell were people who went in from the start, and we kind of came like a family. Yeah, we started together and we stayed with it, and we were just more like a family. Yeah.
And those were outsiders.
Yeah, and everybody else that came in, they were outsiders. Yeah.
Okay. So life was pretty busy. Barkley was busy enough to keep you.
Yeah,
happy.
Barkley was. It was. I guess it was basically the same, except maybe the terrain, sand, and everything. And while I was at Camp Barkley, they sent me down to Fort Bliss for additional machine gun training and aircraft. Yeah, I was a machine gunner, so I spent a couple weeks down, or I don't know how many weeks, but 2 or 3 weeks down in Fort Bliss on an aircraft machine gun.
Now, that is different than what kind of machine gun was the anti-aircraft?
The anti-aircraft would be a 50, no smaller than a 50 caliber, and they're usually mounted on a tripod or something. But it's usually a bigger gun, and so I mean, and each half track had and on my half track I had a 50 caliber machine gun for an aircraft, and because as you're moving down the road, sometimes you would be subject to an aircraft. So each of on our machine gun squad half track, I had a 50 caliber machine gun mounted, but the ones we carried were water cooled 30 caliber. And they weren't too heavy. And there's a machine gunner, and then you had your ammunition carrier that carried the 2 boxes of ammunition. And so the machine gunner and the tripod. There's a little tripod you set on the ground with your 30 caliber machine gun. Then your ammunition carrier would bring you the ammunition. But then each half track had a 50 caliber machine gun on, which was a bigger, and that was for anti-aircraft.
Was the training a lot different between the two guns? When you think about the anti-aircraft training, what was the biggest difference there?
I would, not really. I mean, same principle. Yeah, I mean, we would have a lot of go out on courses for machine gun, and every 3rd, 5th, or 10th bullet was a tracer, which is and then by your tracer, you'd find out whether you go left or up or down or right. And same way with a machine gun. I mean, when you're shooting up for aircraft, why they had the tracer bullets in, and you could find out whether to maneuver your gun left, right, or up or down or something. Yes.
Now, the ones that were telling you where to go, was this by radio, or did you have an observer? One of the guys with you?
And you sit yourself? No.
Oh, it was you could see it.
You could observe it yourself, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and every 10th bullet was a tracer that you could see, and if you was off target, well, that's how you move.
What in the tracer that bullet made you be able to see it? Was it
the color?
Oh, the color.
I mean, you could see it.
I mean, it really had a color.
Or a color or smoke or something.
Okay.
And I can't tell you what a tracer is, but you could see it, where the ordinary bullets you wouldn't see. But a tracer you could see. And when you see that, and it was this side of the airplane, you better move that way. Yeah, okay.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got you to Barkley, got you trained, got you to Bliss. Okay, now
Yeah.
let's get you out of Barkley and get you to New York.
Yeah.
Was there anything exciting or anything that happened on that trip from Barkley to New York other than it was long?
Well, the New York trip was quite exciting. In New York was quite exciting.
Well, tell me about that.
They had a hurricane while I was in New York, and of course we got a pass to go downtown, and the pass, we got a pass to go to New York. Was it Camp Shanks? Was that the name of the Camp Shanks? Okay, we got a pass to go to New York, and they had a hurricane, and it was miserable the night that we got to pass on account of the hurricane. And I remember the show we went to see, Charlie Barnett, the band leader. Of course, I was a big band man anyway, but I mean, and so we went to see Charlie Barnett, and I guess we went to eat in a Chinese restaurant. But I mean, it was so miserable. We were just soaking wet when we went to eat, and a lot of signs and marquees were blown down and things like that.
So it was really a big one.
Yeah. And that's what I remember about New York. And we didn't get to see much of it on account of the hurricane. Yeah, but we did go to the movie and see Charlie Barnett live, and in big band, and we enjoyed that.
Yeah. When you get on that ship, you headed towards Europe. What were you thinking, or how did you feel, or was it no big deal? You just was getting. Tell me how you felt about all that.
Sure, things went through your head. What am I getting into? I mean, it's things like that. And I guess maybe I was in position not to think too much because I don't know how many days was on the ship. Was on Empress of Australia, I think, or Empress, or I forget the name now. But I mean, it was a British ship. And I think it took us better than 20 days or something to cross or something like that. And I was sick 20 days. So, and the British food didn't help a bit. I mean, they steamed all their food and boiled, and I got on duty a couple of times in the where they'd prepare the food, and it was just, the room was just full of steam, and where they boiled and cooked everything. And I didn't enjoy the cooking, but I wasn't in position to eat much of it anyway.
So you were just glad to see England. You didn't care what was
No.
Nothing could be worse than that.
No.
Okay.
So I mean, so my thoughts, I guess maybe my thoughts didn't go what I was getting into.
What is the first memory you have of arriving in England or France or?
Well, I was excited, being a homeboy, never got away from home. And here, hey, I'm in England already. Yeah, I mean, I was excited, and I didn't think about maybe what might happen during the combat or something like that. So I guess those things didn't. And I'm not telling you I wasn't scared either, because I mean, I was really. I mean, because I knew the possibilities, but I guess it didn't bother me that much. But when I went into combat, I was concerned. Yeah. But I was excited going to England, not being a homeboy and never away from home too much.
So did you get to see any of England? Did you get to go to London or?
Yeah, and that was experience too. I was telling you about Stephen Pylock. He wanted me to go with him to London. We got a pass to London, and he wanted to go with him. And he had a pen pal of a girl in London, and he says, I'm going to try to find her. And he knew where she worked, so we got a pass to London, and she worked in some big theater downtown, and we met her, And she's bound and determined that she was going to take us out to her home for supper that night. And that was when everything in England, nobody had anything because of ration. And we had one of the best. She took us out, and we had to go subway, bus, train. We had to go about 3 different ways to get to, and she lived outside, I think, Essex or someplace outside of London. And so she took us out to her home and entertained us that night with a nice supper. And then she says, I'll take you down to the bus station so you can get your way back. And we had to find our way back, and everything was in blackout. And so by the time we got back to London, it was late, and everything was in blackout. And we did get to see Piccadilly, but we didn't get to spend any time because we spent most of the time out to her home. So we really didn't get to see a lot of downtown London just for the summer. But I don't know how long he'd been writing to her, but he knew where she worked, and we looked her up and found her, and she took us out to eat. And that was an experience, yeah. And we got to ride the train, subway, and bus to get to her home.
Did a lot.
Yeah. And it was all during blackout. Yeah.
You went over to Le Havre. What was the first day like? Did y'all land in day or night? The day or the night?
Daytime.
Daytime. What was that like?
And that was after the one-day action on the banks when we. So I mean, everything was clear. So I mean, on our landing, we didn't have any problem. And so we went to our first destination, which I forget the name of the little Tidworth, I think, France, and we stayed there in the, was it chalet? Is that what they call them? Castle or chalet or something? And that's where we barracks for the first week or two while we was getting ready to move up further on, and I think that was just well, it must have been December. And I remember going someplace, I don't know where, and got a French Christmas card, and I got some French, and I remember sitting up in the half rack writing Christmas cards, sending them home. Yeah, and it was kind of back down in the southern part, and a lot of fruit trees and things like that, but it was pretty well bombed out. I mean, the chalet where we stayed was pretty well destroyed. But that's where we stayed for a week or two before we reorganized and moved on.
Was that strange to go into a country that was so destroyed?
Yeah. And really, we didn't get to see too many. I don't know where everybody was. I mean, where we stayed, we didn't get to see too many people of the natives. I mean, but after we moved up later on, well, we got to see some of the natives. But back there where we stayed, we didn't get to see too many natives. I don't know if they'd been moved out and never came back or what.
Tell me about the first action y'all saw the day, and were you in your half track, or were you carrying your machine gun, or what that was like?
But we moved out. We moved up to another place, and we stayed overnight in a barracks, and that was kind of a wild night. We knew we was getting close to the front lines, and one of the fellows in one of the basements found some schnapps, and they passed that out, and some of the fellows got too much schnapps.
I've heard that story. I've listened to one of who did it, I think.
Yeah, and some of the fellows got too much schnapps. And but anyway, in fact, the next morning my half-track driver couldn't hardly drive. And but that was the night before we moved out. And then we got orders to move out the next morning, and or maybe it was under cover of darkness. And so I mean that was kind of a experience. We didn't know what we were getting into, and we didn't hear too much artillery, but every once in a while we could hear some artillery, so we knew we was close. And then as we got closer to our destination where we was going to hit our first target, why we could see some people laying on the side, in the ditches on the side, so we knew we was in combat zone. And that kind of a scary feeling. And then I told you about the incident where we started to take this little town with the German barracks, and we started in, and that was the last time I seen my sergeant alive.
Did you go, when y'all went into the towns to clear them out to make sure that they were safe to go through, were you still using your machine gun there, or did you stay back?
The machine gun usually, as we operated, we usually operated off the point. I mean, the riflemen would actually go over and clear, and we would set up a place where we could protect them. So, I mean, and a lot of times machine gun would be the first people in, and we'd get our point where we would stay, and so we could protect the riflemen from being attacked from the other end, yes. So sometimes the machine gun was the first man in, so we could get a point and set up a guard and give the riflemen some protection as they come in to take over, yeah. Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we weren't going in as a fighting unit. A lot of times we'd go in and set up a post, a machine gun post, to protect the riflemen as they come in.
On the strategy of that, when you set up your rifle position, what did you look for the perfect position, where you needed to be? Was there any strategy, or did you just go find some place and set it up?
Well, of course, the strategy was, to try to find out the people who were coming in. They're going to probably come in a low spot or someplace where they wouldn't be seen. So we'd probably find a location where we thought maybe they would, like coming down a ditch or river or a valley, or a man coming in to attack, he wouldn't be up on high ground so you could see him. So he's going to be under cover too. So, I mean, those are the positions that we would try to cover, yeah. The low spots or something like that, where, because he was coming in trying not to be seen, and so we had to know just about where maybe they would come in at. Yeah.
Did that mean that you were on high ground? You were usually higher than the...
Well, probably, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the closest call you ever had? And you may not want to tell me this, because I know some of these experiences are really bad, but was there ever a time that you thought, this may be my time? Or was there a whole thing full of
yeah. I guess the Hurricane is what, you probably heard that. Yeah, I was in that. That's where I got wounded. I was wounded in Hurricane. And I guess the night of the attack, when we first moved out, was probably I was more concerned or scared than any time ever. I mean, we started to move out, and there's a little snow on the ground, and they issued everybody a white sheet with a hole in. You just pull down, so you just camouflaged. Yeah, and but as we was moving, we got a lot of shells, a lot of artillery over us all the time. And I guess that was probably, and a lot of our fellows were hit. I wasn't, but I mean, a lot of, at the time on our first attack. And in fact, we attacked, then we had to retreat, and then we attacked again. And so, I mean, it was one of those deals. And so, I mean, I guess that was probably my scariest moment, is the Hurricane deal. And we had to go across the bridge. And the old waterworks there, and it was all metal, and on our retreat back, we got into the waterworks, and shells just bouncing all over the waterworks, and but then we had to retreat back across the bridge, and the tanks and vehicles, and it's a hard thing to say, but there's all kind of people laying on the bridge, and of course, you couldn't stop them or move them or anything. But that was one of the scariest things.
Now, you were wounded at Hurleshine?
Well, not the first night. Mm-hmm. We retreated. And that was a funny thing, too. Funny. I mean, we retreated, and I got separated from the squad. And so, I mean, I didn't know. And so I got back to our CP headquarters, and the sergeant or the lieutenant says, "Where's your men?" I says, "I lost them. I don't know where they're at." He says, "Go back and get them." And so I went back, and I found them in a shell hole, and I got them back. But the scariest thing was that after I got back, we had to get back through our own lines. and how did they know it was me or the enemy? And that was, and so, but we made it all right. But
who were those? Do you remember the men that you went back and got?
I think it was Maxie and Sidney Rayner, I think. Yeah, Luther, Maxie, and Sidney Rayner. I think that was the two fellows. And but I found them in a big shell hole.
And then you had to get back through your own troops.
but through my own troops to get them back. But I mean, that was the first thing. He says, "Where's your men?" And I said, and I really didn't. I said, "I lost them. I don't know where they're at." He says, "Go back after them."
How did you find them?
I'll never know. I guess luck was on my side. I guess I had an angel up there looking after me. Yeah, really. Yeah. I mean, I never know how in the world that I could go back through that and find my two men. I think somebody's looking after me.
Were you an officer? Were you a sergeant? Or?
I was promoted twice. The first day in action, my squad leader, which was a staff sergeant, he got killed. And then the sergeant, he got moved up to squad leader. Then he got injured later on. So when he got moved up and the sergeant moved up to staff sergeant, I was moved up to sergeant. Battlefield commission.
And then you had to go get your men.
And then Ernsbacher, that was another Ernsbacher, then he got injured and he got sent back. And so when he got sent back, I was moved up as squad leader as staff sergeant.
And that's when you had to go back and get your men.
No. That was, I was staff sergeant then.
You were staff sergeant.
Yeah, I was staff sergeant then, yeah.
But then later on,
Yeah.
So you had to go find your men.
Yeah, I had to find the men. And how I found them, I'll never know. I'll never know. Somebody was looking after me. And several times in the Army, I think somebody was looking after me.
Where were you? At what point were you hurt? Were you wounded?
I was. The next day we had to move up out again. We had a counterattack that night, people, and we stopped them. Then the next day, they said move out. So we moved out the second time, but we went out and moved into in a stationary position, and the foxholes were already there. I think the Germans had foxholes, so we got in my position. I got in a German foxhole, and I was right. There was a row of trees and a road. It was the same place where we were the night before, through the waterworks and all that division, where I was telling you about all the. And but we went a little bit further on, and there's a big row of trees on the road along the trees, and right on the other side of the trees, there's some foxholes, and we set up. That's why the machine gun squad was. You set up so you protected some more people coming in. So we set up in front, and then the tank moved up and back of us on the road, and he started to shoot over our head to the enemy. I couldn't see him because we were low, but he was up high, so they returned the artillery, and the artillery they returned hit in the trees. And I got hit with shrapnel in the back. Yeah, I was in the foxhole, and of course it was wintertime, and I had a lot of protective clothing, but I still got a little scar. But I was hit by shrapnel in the back, and people say, "Well, you hit in the back?" But I mean, they didn't understand the situation. I mean, because I was up in front of the trees, and the shell hitting the trees, and then it was an anti-personnel shell, and the shrapnel then came down and hit me in the back. Yeah.
So how long?
That's just so I wasn't running from the enemy.
How long were you? Did they have to? Did
Yeah.
you walk out, or did they have to carry you out?
I tell you the truth, I think I took off running. I think, but I didn't go too far, and then the medics took care of me. Yeah, the medics took me, and then I went back to the hospital for around 30 days, I think, and Dijon, France. Oh, no, I didn't go to the I can't tell you where the hospital was, but in recuperation they took me back to Dijon, and that's where.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
What's it like to get wounded, and in that moment of realizing you've been hit? What goes? I guess not. It would be different with each person, but what goes through your mind? How do you feel? Like, am I going to make it, or what is this like? I don't know.
You know, I felt good because it wasn't the end. Somebody was over there taking care of me.
Wow.
It's a feeling that it could have been, you know, and it wasn't. I lived to tell about it. Yeah. And that was my feeling. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I lived it. That I was wounded, but somebody's looking after me.
Okay, then you got a little detained. You ended up going to the hospital for a while. When did you rejoin the?
Yeah, I think it's about 30 days or
30
so,
days.
and they sent me right back to my same squad.
Okay, and where were they? Do you remember where they were when you caught back?
Well,
Were they Colmar?
they had another battle, and I missed it in the Colmar pocket. I missed that. And then after that, they moved back up north, and then it wasn't long after that General Patton needed some help. And that's when they called on the 12th to go up and help General Patton.
Yeah, go help him.
Yeah, so we went up to help General Patton. And that's where we went up and made a move for the Rhine River and crossed the Rhine.
Did you know who y'all were going to help?
No.
They just told you to go?
We said that we was moving, and we didn't know what the deal was. And I think sometime during the process, we heard that it was General Patton. We was going up 3rd Army, General Patton. And we found out it was a little different operation than what the 7th Army was. They didn't let you stop. And as we was moving, there's somebody there to supply you with gas and food and mail on the move. I mean, it was a different operation. I mean, Patton had a smooth operation, but his operation was keep them moving, move forward.
How many days did y'all? That was 6. No. How many days was that from the time you started till the time you got to the Rhine?
Yeah.
Was it?
It seemed like it was a couple of weeks. I mean, because there's a couple of places we did stop and wait, but that was an experience too. I mean, no matter where you look, you saw armored moving all the same direction. I mean, it was quite a mass movement of armored, and it just no matter where you looked, why there was somebody moving in your direction.
And it didn't. Okay. Let me get this view. Across the fields or down the roads?
Roads and everything. Yeah. No matter any bare space, there was room to travel while you saw some armor moving forward. And then we got not to the Rhine, and then we moved into a big open field. And I don't know if that was smart or not, but we had to do it. I mean, because we weren't ready to cross the Rhine, so and that was another scary experience that I had. We moved in, and everybody stationed near their half track, and I had my half track here with my anti-aircraft gun, and we got an air attack while we was in this field, and the mess hall was within 20, 30 feet from my half track, and the aircraft, we got quite a attack from the air, and they dropped I don't know what it was, a big bomb anyway, and it came down, and they got an awful sound coming down through the air. You think, and I run and got underneath my half track, and it lit right next to the mess hall, the kitchen, and it was a dud, didn't go off. So, and I probably wasn't 20 feet away. And it made a big hole in the ground, but the shell didn't go off.
Wow.
Somebody's looking after me again, wasn't they?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, but it didn't go off.
Huh.
Yeah, and it lit within 20, 30 feet from me. And I was under the half track, and I don't think it would have done any good if it went off. Yeah.
Did you ever see Patton there along the Ryan?
I never saw him.
You never saw him?
I never even saw our commander. In fact, I don't think I even seen our battalion commander. I heard about him, but I really never didn't see him.
Is it true that that you had to take all the markings off the 12th Armored Tanks and all that stuff and take off your patches and everything?
Yeah, you didn't identify yourself. I mean, of course, we were called everything going in, the Suicide Division, the Dirty Dozen, the Mystery Division, everything, because nobody knew who we were. So they didn't identify us, no. I mean, that's just like the first day in action, too. I mean, you're talking about moving all your identification. Well, your commander, lieutenant, I mean, of course, were the silver, gold bars or silver bars or something, they would take those off. And I think the first day of action, when I went in and we called him lieutenant, he says, "I'm not lieutenant anymore." He didn't want to be called lieutenant. And
Because they would...
yeah. So I mean, identification, you weren't. Yeah, but I mean, but that was one of the first things he said. I mean, we started still calling him lieutenant and didn't want anybody to salute him or anything. But he says, "Don't call me lieutenant."
Wow. Well, okay, we're along the Rhine right here. And would y'all just wait till the engineers built the bridges?
Well, yeah, we couldn't see it. I mean, the Rhine. No, we weren't in. In fact, I had another. I had another near experience. I mean, and that was my own fault. I mean, while I was there was a little town called Worms, yeah, and that's where we go through. Nice place, and they say it was along the Rhine, but we couldn't see the Rhine. Well, we was always nosy, souvenir hunting, and I went into this nice home, empty, nice home, beautiful home, and I went up and it was dark in the upstairs bedroom, but it had shutters on. And I opened the shutters. Was evidently the Germans could see me open the shutters, and he was on the Rhine or on the other side of the Rhine, and they shot an artillery shell through that bedroom. and I was white, but I was white with plaster dust, but I was white other ways too. And that shell didn't miss me very far. But I mean, that was I opened up those shutters to get some light in the bedroom, and the Germans was on patrol out there, and they could see where somebody was in the house, and they knew it wasn't their fellows, and they put a round of ammunition through the house, and I was in the house when the round of ammunition went through. But that was my own fault. I shouldn't have been in there to begin with. But I mean, was looking for souvenirs.
Well, but you lived to tell the story.
Yeah, I lived to tell the story. Somebody was on my side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, so then y'all were there took them how long to build the bridge?
I would say we was there a couple nights or so.
Couple
Yeah,
nights,
yeah,
okay.
really.
And then y'all just got the word to head
Had to go across the Rhine, and we didn't have any incidents crossing the Rhine, as I recall.
Did you drive across the Rhine?
I wasn't the driver, no.
Okay.
No,
What?
I was a squad leader then.
When you go across a pontoon bridge, Is it just like a normal bridge, or
Oh.
what's the feel?
Well, you feel it.
Do you?
Yeah, oh, yeah. You feel it, and with all that heavy equipment, you wonder, is it all right or isn't it all right? But those engineers did a good job.
Was the river a fast?
No,
kind of river?
as I recall, it wasn't a fast river. And as I recall, where we went across, it really wasn't real wide. Probably, and that's probably the reason they built the pontoon there, because they would probably build it where it wasn't rapid or wasn't too wide, probably, yeah.
Okay, you got across the Rhine, then what did you do?
I think we started, I don't think we encountered any action too much as we crossed the Rhine. And I think we was within Patton a little while, and then wasn't too long, then we went back to our 7th Army.
So Peace was not too far away.
No, not really. No, that and I can't give you any dates when we crossed the Rhine, but Rhine River. But I guess probably, as I recall, it was spring, and the war ended in May, so it could have been April or March, April.
Did y'all do? Were you involved in any of the liberation of the death camps or anything like those things? Were you ever aware of what was going on?
Not really. I mean, we heard about it, but I wasn't. We was involved after the war, occupation on a camp, yeah. But during the war, we didn't liberate anybody. No. But we did took care of a displaced person camp after the war.
Do you think that the soldiers, those of you that heard the stories of the camp, people got liberated and stuff, did any of y'all really have any concept of what that was that y'all found?
I didn't. I was unaware of some of the things that happened, and I probably learned more about it. In fact, we hear about it more and more every day, and every day there's some new information comes out about some of these camps. But before, while we were there, we weren't aware. I wasn't aware of it. No.
After the Rhine, and as you were heading, you're going north?
South.
South?
Uh-huh.
Okay, you're going
yeah, it's the 7th Army was the southern section.
Going south. What was the job then? Was there very much more fighting or battling? Or was
yeah, and that's where a lot of the excitement happened.
Tell me about it.
Okay. I mean, on our way, of course, we was going down through southern Germany,
Okay.
on our way to the Alps, Austria. And our outfit broke the world record in combat. I suppose you heard that. We went 59 miles in so many, 8 hours or something. And those 59 miles was going down the Autobahn. And the Germans were in retreat. And we were more or less fighting all the way, except we weren't in face-to-face combat, yeah. But they were in retreat, and we was going down to the Austrian border, and we went 59 miles. We'd say fighting all the way, and we were fighting because every bridge we'd go across, we'd drop a hand grenade, make sure there wasn't anybody left in the ditches or under the bridges, and some of the things were kind of sad. I mean, we was shooting at everything. Of course, we didn't know. I mean, because we always heard that when they started a retreat, they would use anything they could to retreat in. And we even saw some medics with their big red cross on, and we was even shooting at them. And of course, we got word was, well, they're using those things to retreat in. And we hope we weren't shooting at medics. Yeah, but we weren't shooting anything that moved. We were shooting at. And we went 59 miles, and after we got across one bridge, we understand they did blow it up, and then we couldn't get back. But when we ended up down into the Alps, we had so many prisoners we didn't know what to do with. And in fact, I don't know what they did with them, because the next day we got orders to keep them moving. And the same night, we heard the rumor the war was over.
Really?
And then we said, and we heard the rumor the war was over, but the next day they said move out. And then we got in a tough situation. After we heard the rumor the war was over. We started moving into this small town down in Austria, and we started on this, and they started to shell us with artillery. So we had to retreat. And so we called the aircraft in. And the aircraft went in and bombed this little town. And so the next morning, we started, they said move out again. We started out. Well, for some reason, I don't know why, but my company commander says, well, you be a scout and go up and see what's going on. So I went up. I was a scout, and there was this nice road, and I was using the ditch to go in and see, and I met this little German car coming my way.
In the ditch?
No,
Oh.
on the road.
On the road.
On the road, and the German car coming this way, and so I jumped out and hauled and got him stopped, and he could speak English, and it was the mayor or burgomaster of this little small town, and he was angry and unhappy that we called the aircraft in. And, well, we told him what our situation, and then he told us his situation. There were some SS troops in town didn't want to surrender. The town was ready to surrender, but there was just a few SS troops in town that didn't want to surrender. And so, I mean, but with those 2 or 3 fellows that didn't want to surrender, we had to call the aircraft in and did some damage to the town. And he says, everything's all right now. He says, we surrender. And the company commander says, well, how do we know? And he says, it's all right. And the company commander says, well, you get on the hood of the Jeep and go in with the mayor. So I had to lead the troops in town, riding in the Jeep, and we got in, and it was all right. I mean, he was true to his word. He said, everything's going to be all right now. Says, come on in, and I'll take you in. But the commander said, well, you ride in with him. So, I mean, and it worked out all right. And I think then we kind of cleared the town, and then I think that's when we heard the war was over.
What was it like for you?
Oh, great, great. And then I'll go back. Before we went into action, when I told you they found all this schnapps, I got a bottle. I says, I know what I'll do with this. I said, I'll put it in the bottom of a half drag. And I says, when the war's over, we'll bring it out and drink a toast. I still had the schnapps when the war's over, and I got the bottle out, and we couldn't drink it. It didn't taste good. Oh. But I still had that bottle of schnapps that we was going to drink a toast if the war was over, and we got the bottle out. I don't know what was wrong. Maybe we weren't in the mood to drink. But we was going to bring a toast to the victory, or we thought it was victory anyway. The war is over. But from the first day of action, I told you when that fellow got, and I dug out a bottle and I buried it clear in the bottom of the half track, and I said we'll use that when the war is over, and I still had it, but we couldn't drink it.
That is a great story. That is great.
Great, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a good story.
And when I told you about all those soldiers, or the last 59-mile march, and we got this town, and we thought the war was over. Well, before we got the call to move out the next day, the company commander says there's an artillery battalion up in the mountains, or the foothills, that wants to surrender. He says, take your squad and go up there and get them. I had to take a squad and go up and get a company of men that wanted to surrender. And so I took my squad and we went up. And they did want to surrender. And they did surrender. And they all had handguns. And we'd take their rifles and put it in a tree trunk and bend the things. And because we couldn't take them all back. But in the Army, they had these here canvas buckets that would fold up. we went around and we got a couple canvas buckets of handguns, Lugers and guns, and I got a Luger, and I still got it. But that was from the company, the battalion. The commander says, go up and get them. They want to surrender. And we went up, and my squad brought back a company of men.
May I ask a question? Why at the end of the war you kept on getting to do this? You get to go into the Jeep.
Yeah.
You get to go up there. Was it just that you were so good?
I don't know. I got a Bronze Star. I don't know. Yeah, I got a Bronze Star. And that was another case where the company commander says, the major, the battalion commander, the story was the engineers was coming in clearing the landmines of this little town so we could move through. Well, they got in there and they got pinned down and injured, and they had to leave them. And so the battalion commander told my company commander, send the squad in and bring those men back. So the company commander came to me and he says, I wouldn't do this, but the major wants me to go in and get those men. Says, well, you take your squad in and get those men. and he said it was through a minefield. Well, of course, we didn't know where they were. But I mean, anyway, I took my squad, and with the medics, I mean, I had the medics with me, and we went in, and I really don't know how it turned out, because after, you never see, after something happens, you never know what happens after that. But our trip was successful. We went in and got the men and the medics and everything, and so I don't know if we saved any lives or not. But anyway, I got a Bronze Star out of that deal for going in. And it was undercover, dark. It was at night. And I took the medics in with a machine gun squad and recovered these engineers that was clearing the minefield. And that was a scary situation. I mean, there were snipers. I mean, it was through a big ravine and a big stone wall, and for a while we was covered by the stone wall, but then so long we had to go on the other side of the stone wall. Then we was out in the open, and our troops was on this side of town, and the Germans are on this side of town, and we were subject to some sniper fire, but not a lot. Yeah, but I mean, we made it. Somebody else was looking after me.
You've had a real good person looking after you. Okay, we got to what happened? Did you have enough points to leave, to get discharged, or what did you do then?
No, I had to stay into honorary occupation.
Oh, yes, because you said after occupation, you work with displaced people.
Displaced, Polish.
Polish people.
Yeah, and that was kind of it was kind of a fun deal. I mean, and I don't think we could speak any of their language or anything, but we had a lot of sign languages, and so my job, I was a squad leader, and my job was to keep men on guard, so to keep the GIs, not to keep the Polish in, but keep the GIs out going into the, and there were some nice looking girls in there. So, and the big job was to keep the GIs out from going in. But I had access to the barracks all the time. I mean, because I was squad leader and sergeant of the guard, and you couldn't keep all the GIs out. But they were not, and I had a few experiences with the displaced persons. In fact, I was sergeant of the guard and got to know who people were, and there was a wedding, and I got invited to the wedding, and got a dance with the bride, and they had a big banquet in this displaced camp, and I got a dance with the bride, and it was a fun deal.
That's a neat memory.
It really was. And another memory and we were stationed in this town called. Get the name of the town now. Steinworth, not Steinworth. but it was a smelly town. I think we call it Stinkworth or something, because that's where it was a little farm village, and you lived, and then your livestock was right next to your building and things like that, and then your fields were out. Yeah, there's a cluster of homes, and your livestock was all right next to you, and then you go out to the farm, and it was pretty and nice, but I mean it was kind of smelly. But I mean, and I met a person there, and she could speak better English than I could, and she was the nicest person, and I would say that she had a boy that was 5, 6, 7 years old, and she was probably, I would say she's probably the same age, or a little bit older than I was. And she had a story to tell that was better than any stories I could ever tell. She was originally from Berlin, and they was in business, and her husband and herself would visit London all the time on these trade missions. I don't know what it was. She's some kind of a retail business or something, and they would go to London all the time. And they finally went to London to live. Then the war broke out. Well, they were German. That's just like how we treat some of the Japanese here in the United States. Well, they were German. And they got treated rough as being Germans. And they got moved around everywhere in London. And they would move them out. And they lived in a nice territory in London. And they got moved out to where the Germans would bomb a lot. And they got moved in those sections and things like that. And finally, they got transferred out to the Isle of Man. And then they finally somehow or other got back home to Berlin. And then when they got back there, well, she and her husband got separated. Well, the Russians were coming in, and she got separated, so she took off on foot and bicycle, and it must have been 200 miles away. Steinheim was the name of the town. Steinheim was the name of the town. And that's where her mother lived. So she took her boy and bicycle and traveled at night all the way down to Steinheim from Berlin, and tell them about her story. and how she was treated in London. But she was the nicest person. And sometimes I always wondered how her boy is doing. I remember her boy's name was Bodo.
Bodo?
Something like that, yeah. And we would spend a lot of nights just chatting about some of her experiences. Then she'd want to know just about where I was from, things like that. And I always wondered where she is now.
Well, we're going to have somebody else in a minute, but I want to ask another question or two. We may need to interview on another time. I think you've got more than I can get in my hour and a half. And you told me you didn't talk.
I don't.
You don't talk.
I don't talk.
You don't enjoy it.
I'm not a very good mixer either.
That's right. Okay. If you were to look back at your World War II experiences, is there something that's been in a theme, that's made a theme in your life, or something that you learned that you learned it there and it's carried you through your whole life?
Well, some of the things I learned, I already knew, but it maybe impressed me enough to follow through. I mean, the same way with my employment. If the boss told me to do something, I did it. I mean, if I didn't like it, go someplace else. And it's so that type of experience. I mean, of course, I always had clean habits anyway. But I mean, in the Army, they made you keep clean and keep everything in order, and I still do that today. Yeah, I mean, I try to keep my house clean and my yard mowed and things like that. But I think some of that's a carryback. I mean, because they taught you those things, and then I think they also taught you a little respect. I always did respect somebody older than myself, but I have respect for everybody. I really do. And I think Army kind of taught you some of that.
If you, in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, we're still all around.
Yeah.
If anybody's around, what would be something that you would want to say to them in their time?
I hope it never comes, but I wouldn't deny anybody the experiences I had. Really. I'm not sorry about anything. I'm not sorry about, I don't think I'd volunteer for the Army, but I'm not sorry that I was in the Army. In fact, I think it was wonderful. I'm glad it happened. Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to do it again, but I'm not sorry that it happened. And it's too bad that maybe everybody don't have the same opportunity to go through what I did. But everybody wouldn't have the same opportunity coming back like I did either. That's the only sad part about it. Yeah. I had somebody looking after me. The day, my last day of work, when I was it was I was a decorator, and we was painting inside of a St. Mary's of the Springs Catholic girls, and we was painting the chapel, and it was all scaffold, and we was up above, it was egg and dart molding and everything, and dozen colors, and you just use a little inch brush and that type of thing. So we was painting the chapel, and the sister, the last day, she found out that I was being inducted in the Army. And that night she came to me and she says, I hear you're going to the Army. And I said, yes. And she'd made a little, I don't know what you call them, but I mean, it had a name, but she made, and it was a good luck piece that she'd made. And she gave it to me and says, take it with you. And I put it in my billfold, and I brought it back with me. But an amusing thing about it, though, there's always she asked me, says, are you Catholic or Protestant? I says, Protestant. And she says, God bless you, you're doing the best you know how. And I never forgot that. And she was the nicest person. And we was going through summer things, and I still got that little good luck piece that she gave me. Yeah, and maybe that's what brought me back.
Even though you didn't know better.
Yeah, but she was nice, Catholic sister.
Well, I sure do appreciate your time
Well,
with us today.
Good.
It was good. Thanks.
I hope I told you something. I don't talk about my Army experiences very often. Not really. I mean, and sometimes if somebody will ask me a question, I'll tell them. But I mean, I really don't talk about my Army experiences. I mean, and then sometimes I get started and you can't stop me.
Poor thing.